Welcome back to the Girl Preach Unfiltered podcast. I am Lindsay Schreiber and joined again with my mom, Debra McKinley.
And I welcome you to my home, and I really pray that this will be a blessing and an encouragement to someone who is listening or watching this today.
We are on our second episode of a multi-episode series talking with my mom here near the Cumberland River in Tennessee. We're talking about her life growing up in rural Kentucky, and specifically we're talking about what it was to grow up in a chaotic household and especially to endure childhood SA. Again, we have noticed at the beginning that we're going to cover some difficult themes in this episode, so if you have small ears around you, just be advised of that. You may want to listen to this with your headphones on or listen to it at another time because we're going to talk about some pretty difficult topics again. But when we left off, we had been talking about that you were raised by your grandparents primarily as a child, and that it was while you were there, you lived in a house with a schizophrenic uncle, but you had an uncle by marriage who would come to visit, and this was the person who had abused you as a child. You talked about how that went on until you were about 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
But let's backtrack for just a minute because I wanted to talk some more about life growing up in McHenry, Kentucky. We talked before, again, it was a rural lifestyle. Your grandpa had hogs and you had chickens and all the stuff, right?
Right.
But tell me what you remember about growing up in McHenry.
Well, there's a lot of things that stand out, but one of the biggest things is that the church. It was church. It was Church of God of Prophecy in McHenry, Kentucky. It was a congregation maybe of 40 to 50 people. It was a little white block church, and my time there really stick out in my mind because we didn't have a lot of room in that little church, but as kids we would go and our class was actually on the little platform, and well, we called it singing. You call it praise and worship now, and I call it praise and worship. But there would be an upright piano on the right-hand side in the corner, and there would be what I'd call a couple of bun ladies. My grandmother happened to be one of them, and they seemed to always be the children's teachers. And so we would have little cards, and on one side of the card would be a picture of David and the giant, and on the other side would be the lesson. And so we were called the card class because you got to take those cards home with you, and they was very precious to you because it was like you were putting together a book and you were the Bible. So, that stuck out. Also, we had very spiritual services, and then there would come Sundays like when there would be, they would call it eating on the grounds, which meant the service was going to go all day, and at noon we would go across the street or road, and they would put up these wooden sawhorses, and they would put just planks across them, and everybody would bring food. And one thing that really stuck out to me was R.C. Cola had a factory in Beaver Cuss. Wasn't allowed to say Beaver Dam because it was cussing. And so they would donate. And so the peach drink was outstanding. But as kids, you can imagine there was these big metal tubs all around filled with ice, and drinks were everywhere in them, and watermelon. And so there was good times. And I don't want people to think that my childhood was such a disaster that there wasn't good times, because there was. something else that has really played a part in my life was, and I don't know, some people are going to think this is ridiculous, but anyway, I would the trash collectors would pick up trash like on Monday. And so on Tuesday, there would be this big, it almost looked like a junkyard full of stuff. And you could get bicycle parts, or you could get toys that people threw away. And so, but you had to get it on Tuesday because like on Wednesday was the burn day. And so we would go and for a kid, you can imagine that my grandfather gives you his tools to work with, and you take these things like bicycle parts, and you put together a bicycle that may be a wheel from here and a fender from there. You know, it was so interesting to be a child being able to do that. So I don't want people to think that I shut down to the point. My brain kept functioning. It was like I had to be doing something all the time. And so I'd come home with that stuff. And I remember one time we wanted a pool table. And so instead we found this big suitcase at the junkyard, and we cut holes in the four corners of it, and we get all different kinds of balls and marbles, and that was our pool table. And so it was good times. But, and I don't know if you want me to talk about it right here, but that was also, that played a pivotal part of how I knew what was happening to me become sexual.
Yeah, we can go ahead with that. I was laughing because you said you always had to be doing something.
Yes.
We call it ADHD these days, and we act shocked that I have it. But yeah, we can go ahead with how that played in, because you said, if you missed last episode, catch up. But we were talking about how I think we had said this in the last one, or maybe in our discussion. It would be presented as playful at times, right?
Yeah,
The abuse. And so you said that this environment you were in plays into how you figured out, okay, this isn't just playful.
Right. I had told in the last one of these that we did, I told about us not having inside plumbing. So if you don't have inside plumbing, you had an outhouse. So we would actually, and I know people make a lot of jokes about this kind of stuff, but this was for real for us. When we would go to that junkyard, we'd pick up catalogs to use in the outhouse. And I really liked when the Alden's catalog would come out twice a year, because that meant I had my church, my paper church. That was my paper dolls. I would cut them out and play paper dolls with them. And everybody looked perfect in those catalogs. You know, all the little girls my age had on little print dresses, and they'd have a bonnet to match, and they'd have gloves to match, shoes, and little socks. The boys always had those little shorts and a jacket and a bow tie. Every family in the catalog had a mom and a dad and children, and so I'd cut those out and I'd play. Now my people kind of favored each other because they were using the same models from page to page. So I had a lot of twins and triplets in my church.
Yeah.
Had a very spiritual church. They liked to shout and march, and so I would do that. And I loved playing with those on the floor. But also, when we'd pick up those magazines, I'll never forget the day that I saw the first one, and it was called True Detective or something, and it showed this man with this lady, and the top of her bosoms was kind of exposed, and it was real skimpy, the dress was, and so, and you could tell, while it wasn't graphic like things are today, you could tell that he was trying to control her and force her into something she didn't want to participate in. And I thought, this is what's happening to me. Even though I was young, I was about 6, 7, I was thinking, this is what is happening to me. And I could read by this time, so I would read those stories. And what I was looking at those magazines, and I don't even remember there being a lot of them that we picked up. I just remember that one in particular, and I remember them, and the word rape was in there, and I thought, I never heard of that before, and I thought, this is what's happening to me, and I became aware that it was something sexual, which heightened something in me then, that up to this point my mind could discount it.
Mm-hmm.
He was just playing jokes, and he didn't know when to stop, and so, but then I knew, no, this is something between me and him, and that's when I could sense it, my spirit. And there was a brokenness that began to take place in my spirit at that time.
Do you think, did anybody around you seem to notice? I mean, I know you said you were withdrawn, but did they notice something different?
The school started saying something to my grandmother, because I didn't want to talk it. I didn't want to, talk. I wanted, all of a sudden, I wanted my hair, which had been long, to be cut off really, really short. So I looked like a boy. I wanted to wear my brother's clothes to school, and I wanted like thermal underwear under my clothes, even in the summertime.
Yeah.
And so they were convinced, even though I was getting good grades, they were convinced that something was going on with me mentally. But nobody asked me, physically, was anything going on with me.
Yeah. And I think this could definitely be a whole different episode, but just the part about cutting your hair, if people haven't heard of that kind of reaction before, that's a pretty common thing that you hear about with especially young women who have been through this kind of abuse, that a lot of times they have it in their mind that if they didn't look like a girl, they would be left alone.
Right.
And I believe, well, I'm not going to even say I believe, I've seen it. I have observed young people, working in youth ministry, who began to call themselves trans, or they start dressing like the other gender. And to me, that's part of what's so dangerous about the trans agenda. I think they're probably, I do believe there are some people who truly, they're incorrect, but I think they really do believe they're in the wrong body. But what's really sad to me is that I think there's probably a lot of young people like you that should be a red flag that something is wrong. Something is happening. They're trying to hide. They're trying to change their gender because they think they'll be safer, because girls are not safe.
Right.
And instead of adults looking at that and saying something's wrong, now these kids are in an environment where it's being affirmed and they're being praised for it when the kid is yelling for help. Or on the other side of it, you have people who, especially like very religious people, who are against the trans movement, which I am too, because I think kids are being abused in it. But people who are really against it, who can be really cruel to young people. And they don't ever pay attention or ask the right question to find out, no, this is a kid who's in trouble, and they're crying out for help right now, but instead of having a conversation with them, you are being demeaning to them.
Mm-hmm.
And who's being welcoming to them and listening? It's this affirming side.
Right.
That's part of where my issue is. But I just wanted to say that in case there's anybody listening who they can't understand that. That's a really common. I don't know statistics on it, but I just know from what I've observed that that's pretty normal for people who've been abused to have that kind of reaction to it.
By the time, uh, well, starting from that point, I hated men.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, I thought, I want nothing to do with men. I will never marry. I don't want a man to touch me. I feel every time I know if a man ever touches me, I will feel dirty and associate that to that. Uh, and they would. The thing I had back then that they don't have now is schools really encouraged boys to be boys and girls to be girls. So you had that in the school system that you really don't have anymore. And then by the t- it really did take salvation for me to turn my whole thought process. I knew I was a girl, but I did not want a man to touch me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so had I been now, no doubt somebody would have come along and encouraged me and said, "Well, that's because you are in the wrong body."
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned salvation,
Mm-hmm.
so I want to get towards the day that happened.
Okay.
But we're going to skip over some time to get there.
Okay.
Can you tell us how you made it back living with your parents?
Yes. The coal company came in and they bought out all this land around my grandparents' house, and it became very dangerous because they were blasting and stuff, and so my mom and dad stepped in, and the rest of the family, and so it was so bad that the coal company would have to come and knock on your door, tell you to get in a car, go down the road so many miles, so because they were going to send off a blast, and you'd find rocks and stuff everywhere. So my mom and dad seized the opportunity. I was around 11 then, going on 12, and that's when my parents came and took me back to Indiana.
What was that transition like?
It was very hard because I looked at my mom and dad as an aunt and an uncle.
Mm-hmm.
If I was trying to say the feelings you'd have for a family member, it was an aunt and an uncle. And here was my younger sister, that Sherry, that my uncle had molested as well. And so she was already going through a very hard time herself. So you think about it, and my brother Greg, that's a pastor now in Henderson, Kentucky, he was the younger one. And so here they had the two younger children, and then I move in, and that's not long before my older brother that lived with me, with my grandparents, Wayne, he moved in as well. So it was like blending two families, and my mom and dad still were having friction themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so while I got out of the chaos of now I didn't have to put up with my uncle, now I was trying to adjust to this relationship with my parents. Mm-hmm. And I struggled. I really did struggle.
And you said in the last episode that you you never told them about the abuse
Not till I was 32.
because you were afraid your dad had an issue with alcohol and anger,
Yep.
and you were afraid what was going to happen.
And now I'm 11 years old, and what do I tell them?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was afraid I'm going to hear, why didn't you tell us?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I felt like I'm the bad guy here now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my aunt's uncle has been doing something to me.
Your aunt's husband.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, my aunt's husband. I thought I'm going to be the bad guy.
Yeah.
How do I explain that?
Mm-hmm. So you go to live with them. You're about 11.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to go ahead and take us to right before your car wreck?
Okay.
What was life like leading up to it?
Well, my mom started going back to church, and so, but I didn't want anything to do with church. I didn't want anything to do with God, because I had thought, you know, why would God allow something like this to happen to a child who's done nothing, you know, don't know sin, and why would God allow this? So my heart had become very hardened, and I had become so, I didn't care about life. It just didn't matter to me, but I still excelled in school. It's like I don't know, it's like I had to prove something to myself. So I still excelled in school. So it was just prior to my 16th birthday, and my older brother was driving by now, and we were going to a Halloween party. And so I was going as a female clown. So I had put on these big black clown bloomers with big pink or purple and orange polka dots. And so he knocks on the door and he says, "Hey, I'm going to Bustler's," which was a gas station. And he said, "You want to ride?" And by this time, we had moved out in the country, a place called Ball City. And so I put some bell bottoms on over those bloomers, and I put it on my loafers, which had the bottom just about coming off. So we go down there, and we take our younger brother with us, and we're all in the car. We start back. It starts raining. We're between two cornfields, but it's a blacktop road. And so there was a car coming. My brother switched the lights to dim, and the guy went on by, and then he went to switch them on bright, and when he did, they went completely out. So he hit the brakes. The car started spinning, and none of us had on seatbelts, you know. All three of us on the front seat, none of us had on seatbelts. So the car starts spinning, it goes straight up, and my door opens. And at that point, I could feel gravity just pulling me. I mean, it was just pulling me out. My younger brother, Greg, was trying to hold on to me. And finally, I said, "Greg, you got to let go, or we're both going to go." And so I tore away from him and went out. And the minute I left that car, I could feel the rain in my face. And I thought, I'm going to hell. You know, all this time I said I didn't care. I care. And I'm going to hell. And the reality hit me immediately. And I began to call out to God, "God, don't let me die and go to hell." And I explained this, that God gave me a span of time that I cannot explain. But it felt like that all of a sudden my body just leveled out, and then I began to cry out, you know, "God, forgive me of my sins. I'm so sorry. Please don't let me die and go to hell." And that went on for minutes. I know in reality it could not have, but it felt like, 5 minutes I'm flying in the air. And then he allows me to black out because I don't feel impact. And so I wake up, I'm laying down in the mud in this cornfield, and I can hear my brothers. And what had happened, they hit that pole and cut it over, an electrical pole. The wires came down on the car, but they crawled out of that car, with just fine. So my older brother, he's in shock, and he comes running to me. There's no light. He's trying to follow my voice, and he picks me. I see a farmhouse, and I said, go to that light and get help. And he says, no, you do it. So he picks me up, and I realized then that my right leg, this part is what is out here.
Your calf.
Yeah. And then this part that I can see that blood is pouring out of this part. So it broke away right here.
If you're listening on Spotify, she's pointing to the outer side of her calf.
Yeah.
So
and it broke right here.
It broke like right under her knee.
Yeah.
Her bone was broken.
And so it was a compound fracture. And my leg's out there, and I said, I can't do it. I severed my leg. And so he drops me down the mud. So then he runs to the highway, and he's trying to flag traffic down, and cars are keep going by.
Yeah.
And then finally one stops, and it's two young seniors from the high school, and they young men, and they run out there. And one is holding my head up out of the mud, and the other one is gone to call an ambulance. And so I'm awake. And then...
for people who don't know what a compound fracture is, it didn't cut your leg off, but the bone broke and the bone had come out of the skin.
Right. And so somebody in the meantime had called my dad. And he comes running to me in the dark, and he can't see me, but he can hear me. And he runs up on my right hand and breaks my little finger. And so...
There's nothing funny about it, but it's just sort of like,
okay,
what else bad is going to happen in this story?
So they take me to the hospital. The ambulance does, and I remember them walking in, and they had to ask this, and the doctor says, is there any chance you can be pregnant? And I said, no. And he says, well, we got to put a body cast on you, and that's why I need to know that. And so I said on the last one that I remember being kissed at 15, and that was my mother coming in thinking I was going to die, and she kissed me on the forehead. And so I wake up and I'm in a body cast.
How much, when you say a body cast,
okay, it started...
what was covered?
Okay, it started at the neck and went all the front and back, and went all the way down to the waist, and then all the way down on the left leg, because I had broke my femur too on the left leg.
Yeah.
It was all the way down on there, and then all the way down on the right leg, and I had two big horn-like things, which was really screws, coming out on each side of the cast.
So you had the impact of the fall. You go airborne, you fall. When you fell, the bones in your right calf come out the side of your leg.
Yeah.
You broke the femur on the left side, so the bone that goes up to your hip.
Yeah.
That was broken. Your dad runs on top of your
my little finger.
Your pinky on your
right.
Which, I mean, who even needs that when you're thinking about everything else that's wrong? So now you're in a cast, literally covering everything but your head.
And my arms were free.
And your arms were free. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
And how long were you in that?
Well, I was supposed to be in that for about a year, but after about, well, I was supposed to be in that for about 7 months.
Mhm.
And so then, well, November, December, January, February, March. It was about the 5th month when it come off through a sledding accident. With the old cast, it seems like you shouldn't be on a sled and hit a tree, but that's what I
Apparently not.
did. And so it started coming loose.
Just a wheel of bad decisions.
But when I woke up from the surgery and was in the cast, the first person outside the family came to see me was a minister, and he's still alive today in Kentucky. His name is W.W. Webb, Wiseman Webb, and he was pastoring the local Church of God of Prophecy there, and he would come every day. I think he missed 1 or 2 days for a convention, and every day I was in the hospital, he was there to see me.
And you said that your parents didn't attend church, right? Your mom had just started to go back to
Yes,
church,
yeah.
but you didn't attend.
Right.
But he would come and see you every day.
Yeah, yeah. He would come and see me every day, and then I remember one day he had been there so much that one of the nurses and this it meant so much to me. He will never know how much this meant to me, but of course they wanted to check me, so he left the room and stood out in the hallway, and I could hear him, and a nurse come by and she said, "Are you her dad?" And he said, "No, but I wouldn't mind being."
Mm.
And it validated me.
Mm-hmm.
It thought, somebody thinks I'm valuable enough to say that to me, you know, and or about me, say that about me, and it meant so much to me. And I thought, you know, things have got. This is the change for me.
Yeah. Well, you had that, I mean, beyond near-death experience, I guess. And a lot of people have stories of, crying out to God in those kind of moments. Do you think, well, I mean, this is really speculative, but what difference do you think it made that the pastor kept showing up? Do you think that moment in the cornfield or in the air when you were praying, do you think that would have kept you? Would you have gotten back on the right path at that moment? Or do you think the fact that he showed that interest, is that what kept you getting your life back on the right spiritual track?
I think he played. I think he played such an important part because he connected me to a church family,
Mm-hmm.
and once I was connected to that church family, when I'd have to go to the doctor and I was in a body cast, there was a family with a station wagon, and the wife would come and pick me up in the station wagon and take me to the doctor's office.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would get cards from people,
Yeah.
from the church. I never had any kind of connection like that before in my life. And so the school said that they would bring a tutor to my house. My dad had a job at the Evansville airport with good insurance, but it never got, the paperwork got delayed. So people would bring me lessons to do so I could stay up with my schoolwork and graduate with my class at the end of high school and stuff. I just had a church connection, and so once I was out of that body cast, I wanted to be at that church, and I wanted to be there every time the doors were open.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot to unpack in the middle of that. I think we hear so many stories that people tell, and I'm not I'm not taking anything away from how true they are, because I've definitely seen churches that don't function right. People don't do right by each other. They mistreat each other. I've seen that. But people like to paint as if all churches are like that. And that's not true. And, this is a story that proves that there are people that when they say a church family, they don't mean a dysfunctional one. They
Right.
mean like the ideal family that actually cares about you and takes care of you. But I was wondering that about Brother Webb coming to see you, because I just think a lot of people, they have those, a real come to Jesus moment, but then things change and you get far enough out from that incident and you forget it. I know you've never forgotten it, because I can quote your testimony verbatim. I've heard it so many times, but a lot of people don't have that, and they just go right back into their old patterns. And the other thing that stands out to me in your story is that you hear so many people talking about, you said as a kid it sounded like there was a lot of anger, either anger towards God or distrust of God, that those things had happened to you. And now you have this seriously traumatic moment, being ejected from the car, falling, and then everything that happens, out in that field. And then you're in this body cast. And by the way, I mean, body casts back then are not like casts now, right? This was, I think this was probably back in the days when they would have to like change the cotton in and out of your cast. And it was ongoing, physically difficult to be in that, right? But your reaction to this bad thing happening was the total opposite of your reaction to the other bad things that happened. Does that make sense what I'm saying? That you said before, when you got removed from your grandmother's house, you didn't want to go to church. You didn't want to be a part of it. You had these really negative feelings towards God. This other bad thing happens, but it brings you to the Lord, and you don't want to leave. And it kind of makes me feel like Brother Webb and those church members made the difference. Mm-hmm. Like maybe it's not just an accident or just chance of which way a person turns. Something bad happens. Does it bring that person close to God, or does it make them hate God and try to run from Him? And maybe the difference is what happens afterwards.
And it's somebody, that's one of the reasons I fell in love with Girl Preach from the beginning. Is women are just more sensitive to pick up on this kind of stuff, and you can make a difference when somebody comes along and says, just the littlest of things, like Brother Webb had made that statement, that just turns on in your head. I remember when I got out of the body cast and I went back to high school, they told me, they said, you're going to have to be in this alternative class until you catch up, which meant I was going to have to take so many tests a day for so long to catch up. And I remember the class being taught by a lady named, her last name was Lindsay, which happens to be your name, which happens to be my maiden name. And I believe God planted her there because the alternative class was for kids that had real issues, fights, disrespectful, and so it only had like 5 girls in it. But I found myself sitting in that class, and she came over one day to me and she said, "You don't belong here." And that just stuck in my mind. She said, "We need to get you out of here as quick, because you don't belong here." And I believe God planted her. Mm-hmm. But God began to plant people all along my way to where I just fell more and more in love with God. That night, flying through the air, I started out flying from that car, just begging for a merciful God to save me. It wasn't, "I love you so much, God." Mm-hmm. It was, "I need you. I have to. You're my only hope." And He is. But by the end, by the time I came out of that surgery and woke up, I was in love with God. I loved God. And so every time somebody from church or somebody would pour an encouraging word to me, it was like I was walking more and more in faith. It was like I was falling in love more and more with God. And my future, I didn't know what it was in store for me, but I knew God was going to be in it. And so it did make a difference in my life, that church. And I don't know, to be honest with you, how I would have been had I not have had those people walking with me in faith.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think when the church functions like it's supposed to, it should be representative of God's love, which people say that a lot, but I think they're missing. The Bible says God's love is demonstrated that when we were yet sinners, that Christ died for us. And we talk about how Jesus, he's Emmanuel, that he came to be with us. And the church was embodying Jesus as Emmanuel, that you were not alone.
Right.
It didn't make it any easier, everything you were going through, but it meant that you weren't having to be there by yourself. And, you mentioned, you brought up Girl Preach, and I was just sitting here and I was thinking about, especially like that situation. There are so many women, they're not preachers.
Right.
And they follow us. They're not going to preach. They're probably not going to teach. They don't have that kind of ministry. But I just want to affirm, in this story, you didn't mention Brother Webb's sermons.
Right.
I've actually never heard you say anything about the way he preached. I know you went to church eventually, but I've never heard you say anything about his sermons. But I've heard repeatedly you tell a story about him coming to see you. Likewise, who did you mention in this story? You've just mentioned a woman that put you in a station wagon and took you to the doctor. I think there are a lot of women that maybe you aren't going to preach. And look, if God ain't called you to it, if there's any other choice, take the other choice, right? Because this isn't an easy road that the Lord's making some of us walk on. But I just want to affirm that there's women that maybe you don't preach, but you can take food to a house when a woman has had a baby, mm-hmm. or has had surgery, or she's tied up with something with her kids. You are ministering in a really massive way in that moment. Or to go to a new mom's house and help her clean the house. And not in a way that makes her feel bad about it, but you find a way to do it where you're just spending time together and you just happen to help make sure some things got taken care of. Or you become the person that, a woman can't take her kids to soccer practice, but you can take them to soccer practice. That's ministry just as much as me getting up and preaching like I did this morning. And in some ways, that ministry is going to show people the Lord in a stronger way than someone getting up and preaching it. So when you said that, I just wanted to affirm that if anybody's listening, those are real gifts. Mm-hmm. I can't make a casserole to save my life. We all know it. I just read an article in People magazine about this woman, and the article title was something like, "Woman survived cancer twice, almost died when her friend made her a dinner." And she got botulism from the dinner her friend made. And my husband was standing there. I said, "Listen to this. This is exactly what would get me in People magazine, is accidentally killing my friend with food." I can't do that stuff. And I just don't think at this point I'm going to learn how. But if you can, I want you to know that that's important and that makes a difference too.
So, something that made me think, that I think is really, really also set me on this path of not looking behind, but looking forward, was we got a pastor, and he was rough as the day is long. His name was Brother Gaddis. So he calls me and he says, "I have something," because he noticed I wasn't in with the singing group, because I can't sing. If I did, I'd be on that platform all the time. And so I didn't play anything or anything, but he didn't want me to waste.
And this is after your out of body cast.
Yeah, yeah. And I started going to church. I'd been going for several years, and Brother Webb left, and then we got another pastor. But a few pastors away was Brother Gaddis, and he didn't want me to waste. And he said, "I have something I want you to do." And I was a young girl, or a teenager. I was still a teenager. He said, "I have 3 ladies that can't get to church." And he said, "I want you to go every Sunday morning before church," because I had to be at church time, okay? And he said, I had to be at church by the worship starting, okay? He said, I want you to take our Sunday school booklet, and I want you to read the Sunday school lesson to all 3 ladies every Sunday, okay? The first one was a lady named Sister Crow. She was a little short lady, and she was just, I really think she could have come if she wanted to, because she was so spirited. But she was funny, and she was spirited, so I would read to her. The second one was a lady that was in a coma. Her name was Iona Vanover, and I would go, and I would read the Sunday school lesson on Sunday morning to Iona Vanover. And I was standing next to a woman that was in a coma. I believe some way God was allowing her to hear that lesson, but I'd read that lesson.
And your pastor knew she was in a coma when he told you to go read it.
Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah. But he there was a reason he was having me.
Yeah.
You know. So then.
I get it.
And the third one was a lady named Mealy Roberts. Mealy Roberts was just an interesting lady. She would say to me all the time, "God's been good to me." And Mealy was a lady that when she was pregnant and she had her baby, 18 months old, and the baby was he was crawling on the floor, and he got a pop bottle top and the metal ones, and it got hung in his throat, and he died. And then her husband, a short time later, pulls up in a car, and he says, and she's holding on to God this whole time. He says, "I'm leaving you," and the other lady's already in the car, so he left her. She had a relative in the family who convinced her to let her help take care of her finances. So she ends up in a home and loses everything that she had, still holding on to God. Then she goes blind from diabetes, and a tornado had hit our town one day and blew out the whole side of her apartment complex, and she was sitting up against the inner wall because she could feel her way to that, saying, "God's been good to me." And she would say that to me constantly, and I believe God was, letting me see through all these ladies, very different, how people hold on to faith and hold on to Him, even they've gone through so much in their life. And I would just look at her, and the love of God, it wasn't just words for her. The love of God would just pour out of her, just pour out of her. And so I will forever be thankful that the pastor seen that in me, where I could be on the seat wasted, but I knew there was something on the inside of me that could be a blessing to them. And so we can't, there's real people that need real help.
Yeah.
And we're the answer.
Yeah. Well, and I was thinking, when I was a kid, you were a Sunday school teacher. You taught adult Sunday school when I was young, but you've also taught children's Sunday school. You teach Wednesday night children's church at my church now. But I was thinking about your first experience teaching Sunday school was, well, to a woman in a coma who couldn't talk back to you, but then to these other women who I'm sure those were interesting conversations about the material. I was thinking about the scripture. It says, you don't despise small beginnings.
Right.
And your pastor, I think the pastor saw a lot of value in sending you to do that for those women, to have someone there with them, for one thing, for them to feel connected with the church, to not feel like they were missing out on the instruction in the church, but then for you to be able to hear their stories of faith. And also, he's taken someone who had been this very shy, withdrawn young person, and he's helping you to get comfortable having conversation and sharing God's word in this way. And that was an investment in you for the future. A lot of people would have looked at that and said, I can't believe this man is going to tell me to go waste my time talking to a woman in a coma. That's what he thinks of me. I mean, I've been around church long enough to know what people would say to that request. But he understood a value in it that a lot of people couldn't see. And you, I'm sure by that point, you wanted to give something back. You wanted to serve the Lord. But that was the church that had done for you. So why wouldn't you want to invest back and do what the pastor was asking you to do as well? So
I also want to say that as a youth in that church, we had a very lively ministering team that would go out on Friday nights and minister at smaller churches. And I wanted to be a part of that team, even though I couldn't sing. I could mouth it like I could, because it was a pretty good-sized team that went out. And there was couples. The farmers were a couple that always picked me up and took me to those functions, and seeing that I always had a way, and I see them occasionally when I go back to Indiana, and I will thank them every time for doing that for me, because you said this about ADHD. You think I have it? Okay. but for a person that is like that a million thoughts go through their mind at once, to sit at the feet of like Millie Roberts and just let her talk about the goodness of the Lord, you never wanted to leave that spot, because you felt just overwhelming presence in that spot. And we can be that to people. We really can be that type of person to people that's been through turmoil, and say that God is here. God is your answer. And there was several at that church that just kept pouring into me. And it made a difference. It just really made a difference.
Yeah. Well, I hope that this conversation, I mean, we didn't really know where it was going when we started, but here we are. But I think it's gone to a good spot, again, that there are, I'm going to call them anointings. We talk about like people who have hospitality, that's a gift that God has given to people. But I do think it's an anointing that people have it's abnormal. It's not, it's, to me, I think some of the most unsung people in the church are the ones who are the greeters at the door that welcome people in. I think some of the most undervalued people in the church are the ones who will always go and encourage the pastor, even if it was an absolute. I've talked before about Joyce Cowan. Sister Cowan was she was a treasurer in our church for a long time, but when I was in my first stable full-time position in ministry, I was a youth pastor, and that's when I really started preaching a lot. And I would get so nervous because the church had so many people who knew the Bible, and I was so scared that I was going to preach something. I should have just been nervous to preach it wrong, whether they knew it was wrong or not. But I was so nervous that one of these, saints of the church was gonna like come and like wag their finger at me and tell me how I'd gotten something totally wrong that I'd preached, which they never did that. They were very good to me. But Sister Joyce, especially, I could preach. It could be like hot garbage that I had just delivered. And I mean, I'm sure it wasn't, but it felt like it sometimes. Sometimes you would finish, it's like, what was that? But it didn't matter what I preached. She would always come up to me and she would pat my hand and she'd say, "Oh, that was rich. That was so rich." And I'd smile and think, man, if I'm ever in trouble, I hope you're on the jury. But she always encouraged me in that way. And I've openly told of a specific night I was about ready to quit ministry entirely, go back to my old career and just be done. And she came in early to church that night to encourage me. She brought me a poem that she typed up for me and just spoke this encouragement over me. People like that, I don't think people understand that is when you're in ministry, that's as valuable. An encourager is as valuable as a piano player, the Sunday school teacher, the people that run the sound, whatever it is, that's just as important. And sometimes we overlook it. So even in that, if you are listening to this because you want to hear her story, thank you for being here with us. But you found us, but you're not really a preacher. I want you to understand, even just being the person who says words of encouragement, I'm not putting on when I say that's a massive gift, and it's something that's missing in a lot of churches. And I do want to point out again, it has become so commonplace for people to talk about all their hurts from the church. And I'm not saying that's untrue, because I got some stories that I could tell you that it's a wonder that I would ever go to a church again. I have also been the person that people would claim that I've caused their hurts. And you know what? Sometimes I probably did, not realizing what I had done. That's the truth. And if so, I was wrong in it. But this is a story where this healing balm comes through the church. Mm-hmm. And I think it is the work of the devil when we go along with this business that, yes, all churches are a mess and they're a disaster and everybody's horrible. The number one thing we can do as Christians is for us to be the church we're supposed to be. Let us actually be the proof of Emmanuel. Let us be proof that God is here with us because he sent us to love and to take care of people. That's the number one thing we can do. But we should also be very mindful and careful. There's a difference in calling out things we see that are wrong so they can be corrected, and calling it out and continue to just ruminate on it publicly. We become really bad PR because not every church is that way. And we need to be mindful of that when we talk, because I think that the devil uses that to keep people from trying one more time. Mm-hmm. Because if you already have in your mind that all churches this way, and then you hear stories on and on, you're going to say, well, I guess they are all like that. There's no point of me going to one. And here we have an example of people who were just meeting practical needs. This is nothing hyper spiritual that you're talking about. Just meeting practical needs and taking care of someone who was had been shuffled around and needed a family. And you said in our last episode, people had asked, why did you keep coming around your abuser? And you said, I wanted to be around family. Mm-hmm. I didn't have family if I stayed away from him. It's amazing, early in your life, that desire for family actually puts you in this dangerous spot. But then as a teenager, the church stepping in to become the family is what ends up being a rescuer for you.
And that is so true. And I want to encourage people also, especially if they're like teenagers or young kids, and they've done, you feel like encouraging them, and you think, oh, they're going to feel awkward, or they're going to feel like what's the and I believe Satan uses it. Sometimes teenagers, because of the way they react to things, we avoid encouraging them. Mm-hmm. and go encourage them. Now, if they act funny, it's because teenagers are just awkward.
Yeah.
Okay, but they don't. You never know what a few words of encouragement says, and we need to be doing that in the body of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
We need to be encouraging them and letting them know, hey, you're doing a great job, because just a few words. If when a person come up and said, Debbie, that dress looks so pretty on you today at church, you don't know what that means to somebody who had spent most of their life feeling ugly and dirty, and you say that, or you go up and say, I really am glad when I see you here at church. It just puts a smile on my face. It doesn't take a whole lot, and for me as a grandma today, and you as a mom, Lindsay's son Kai, who is 11, has expressed his desire to be a street preacher. And so today he he practiced last night, and today he just did an excellent job. But what thrilled me was old and young alike was coming to him and said, "Oh, Kai, you did wonderful." And I would watch him. The elderly were hugging on him, and he was just beaming. And he was saying, you could see he thought, I really did do a good job.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't take a whole lot. But if we don't step in and do that, the world is going to come along and say things to them that thinks, well, I'm more connected to them than I am Christians.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
so I was one that ate up every word of encouragement when I came to the Lord.
Almost every young person that I've mentored, we have to have a conversation about, once you've preached, because I've been with a lot of young people preparing them for their first sermons, and they don't know what to say when someone compliments it. And almost every one of them, I've had to have this conversation with them. Someone will come and say, "Oh, that was a great word." If Sister Joyce had come up to them and said, "Oh, that was so rich," they would just giggle.
Yeah.
Or they wouldn't know what to say, or they would panic or freeze, or sometimes they'll try to say something that sounds really spiritual, but then it just makes the person who came and said it feel awkward that you said that. And so I'll just tell them, just say thank you. And then they just kind of look at me like, well, isn't that arrogant? And I say, not if they're not your words.
Right.
I'm accepting that as a vessel. I really don't have a problem. Maybe this is where Kai gets this. I don't have a problem with acknowledging if I've preached something and I know it landed well. I don't have a problem acknowledging that. I don't have a problem acknowledging, and I hope when people hear me preach, they can hear my excitement in it when I'm preaching, because that's something I got to receive first, and it wasn't me. It's not my intellect. So I don't have a problem with just saying thank you, because I don't think I'm accepting the thanks for myself.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's like you are the messenger that brought something from one person to the other.
Right.
And they thank you for it, and you say, I'll take that news back to the king. That's really how I feel, and I don't feel like that's arrogant in any way, because I just don't think I own the things I say when I'm in a pulpit.
Right.
So, and it just takes the pressure off of everybody to just say thank you and move on. But I think that's a good point, that a lot of people don't know how to accept a compliment. And you take a person who has been in a chaotic house or been through abuse, or someone who is, I know I talk about ADHD a lot, but it's really colored a lot of my life and a lot of my son's life too. That's why it's a big deal to me. When you have these kind of issues going on, you feel like you get criticized a lot, and you don't have practice at accepting compliments. So if you do try to be the person who's being encouraging and you feel like it's not being accepted or received, that doesn't mean stop.
Right.
It means they need more practice accepting it, and just see it that, the Lord sent you to help them learn how to accept that and to see how he's using them in that moment. So we appreciate that you've joined us here. I think on our next episode, my plan is that we're going to talk about when everything with your abuse finally came forward. This was
Okay.
sort of a reprieve here. In your teenage years, you don't end up telling until you're in your 30s. So I think next time that's what we're going to talk about, leading into you don't end up pursuing justice criminally until you are 50.
Well, let's see. It is. Yeah. Yeah.
So we'll get to all that in the future episodes. Make sure that you like and subscribe on our YouTube channel and also in our Girl Preach Unfiltered Spotify so that you don't miss this content. If this has blessed you, please share it. Tell your friends about it so that we can get more word out. And April 11th at 9 a.m., we are going to have our very first Girl Preach conference in Lebanon, Tennessee at the Capitol Theater. We are so excited about this. This event, I will be there. One of the things I'm going to be presenting on is an apologetic for women preachers. So if you have ever struggled with being able to answer questions about can a woman actually lead in a church or preach, I hope I'm going to give you the biblical answers that will help you to answer those questions. I'm also going to be sharing another word of encouragement for women. We also have a lady coming in who is a licensed social worker, and she's going to talk about trauma, and she's going to talk about soul wounds, about how do you deal with what happened deep down, not just the psychoanalyzed part of it. How do you deal with what happened spiritually to you when you've endured abuse? And Grace Love, a friend of Sister McKinley's, is going to be with us as well. We'll also hear a message from Marcy Brannon, and we're going to have worship as well with Kaylee Burton is going to be leading that, a friend of ours. So please go ahead and register for the Girl Preach Conference, April 11th in Lebanon, Tennessee. Go ahead and register. You pay at the door $25. That includes your lunch. And it'll be a fantastic day of fellowship with each other and encouragement for women in the ministry. So come back, join us next week. See you then.